How'd you get a haircut?
Was 3 should be K instead of M. I'm going to bring it up
Hey, Dan.
in the package.
Hey, Jim, how are you?
Just
I'm okay, I
first.
think.
All right, everyone, I'd like to thank you for coming to the Planning Commission meeting of the City of Delafield. If you could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sally, if you could help us with the roll call, please.
Certainly. Mayor Kent Atwell,
Present.
Alderperson Tim Eicher,
Here.
Dave Greenway,
Here.
Dan Jaschinski,
Here.
Ed Merrick,
Here.
Jim Ryer,
Here.
Laura Schultz,
Here.
Robert Weiler,
Here.
and we also have Planner Roger Dupler and Attorney Jim Hammes with us. Thank you.
Thank you. For the first item on our agenda is a public hearing, amend conditional use permit, University Lake School, DLC 0734.989, DLC 0735.998, and DLC 7035.999, 4024 Nagawicca Road, consideration of amended site plan and architecture for a nature study classroom on campus. Is there anyone that would like to speak to public hearing number 1? Come on up. Oh, no? You don't want to speak on the public hearing?
I represent the university.
Yeah, so we'll bring you up during the agenda item. This would be for citizens' comments. No problem. Any comments from citizens or non-citizens for the public hearing? Seeing none, the public, did you want to make a?
On Lake School or on?
The agenda item I just read, University Lake School.
No, not yet.
Alrighty. Okay, so public hearing number 1 is now closed. We'll move on to item number 1. Approve Planning Commission meeting minutes of September 25th, 2019 meeting and/or changes.
I'd like to move to approve the September 25th, 2019 Plan Commission meetings.
Second.
Minutes as presented.
Thank you. We have the
Second.
first, you got the second?
I do. Thank you.
Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay, item number 2. City of Delafield citizens' comments pertaining to subjects on the consent agenda. Only the items on the consent agenda. Is there anyone that would like to speak to the items on the consent agenda? Anyone on the consent agenda? Seeing none, the consent agenda, public comments are now closed. Item number 3, the consent agenda. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda or remove any items and approve what remains?
I would like to remove item B, as in boy.
Okay, anybody want to remove anything else? Can I get a motion to approve everything except B?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda except for item B.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 3B, DLC 0804.999.006, 3255 Gulf Road, Delafield, owner applicant, Albrecht Century Foods. Roger? Or
That
Dan?
was me. I guess I just wanted to know how that worked with the alcohol. I mean, is this do you go online and do your order and then pull up?
This is no different. We've approved this, I think, in 4 other establishments throughout the city.
I've used it at Pick and Save.
Okay.
You can do exactly that. You can order online, and they have specific places where you pull up, and they'll bring you your
I understand that. It's the alcohol
Checking.
thing with checking an age that I'm wondering about. And
I've
then,
purchased alcohol. When they come to your car
Do they
with the
card
groceries,
you?
they ID me right in my car.
okay. So then what happens if the person is not old enough to purchase? Do they, have you
Assume the
already?
same thing happens as if you're in the store. They won't.
Yeah, but have you already made the purchase at home on a credit card? And then is it, they go back in the store? You know, I was just wondering how that
Yeah,
all
it could go
works.
either way. You can
How-
pay in advance. You give a credit card in advance, but the final sale isn't done until you're there where you sign. Because if they don't have something, if they don't have something, they won't charge you for it, right? So your order would be less one item because they're out of stock or
Okay.
something.
Can't we have a representative?
And we can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No.
Are you both turned on?
I'm on.
Yeah.
Hello, hello, hello.
Roger, turn your mic on, please.
Hello, hello, hello.
Now?
No.
Can you hear me now? All right.
Roger, no.
So I will talk like this.
You can speak in here, but Roger, no.
Is it the microphone?
Okay, so do we have a motion? Are you good?
I am good with that.
Okay, can somebody make a motion for 3B, please?
Motion to approve 3B on the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay. Anybody that's on the consent agenda, you have now been approved, and you're free to go.
That includes Window Design Center, Albrecht Century Foods, Complete Health Chiropractic, Blue Collar Coffee, and hopefully that was it.
So fire and indigo.
Okay. 4, City of Delafield citizens' comments pertaining to items on or off the agenda. Now, we have some special instructions tonight on citizens' comments. We'll take citizens' comments, but anything that's brought up as relating to the gun club that's new, not previously discussed in the past, the Planning Commission is not allowed to take into considerations in their discussion tonight. So we are going to take citizens' comments, but just understand that if it's anything that's new, the Planning Commission is going to be instructed to not consider those comments. So if there's any questions on that, when you come up, please just ask and we'll clarify it for you. But otherwise, is there anyone that would like to come up and make citizens' comments for anything on or off the agenda? Is there anyone that would like to make citizens' comments for anything on or off the agenda? Seeing none, citizens' comments are not? Okay, did you want to?
I'm going to read.
Okay.
What number do you want? 1744, 46-4.
Good evening. I'm reading this for a fellow citizen, Bill Restock. He writes, Dear Common Council and Plan Commission, this past summer I attended the Plan Commission meeting and Common Council meeting where I spoke out against Soothing Senses CBD and vaping store that was seeking a permit to operate at Village Square. At both meetings, the business plan was denied. I was absolutely shocked to discover that the shop opened for business in August. As a Common Council member, Plan Commission member, you are entrusted to act on behalf of the citizens of Delafield to protect us against actions or businesses that would degrade our community. Approving a vape CBD store for Village Square was irresponsible, in my opinion, a very bad decision. We are hearing almost daily about the harm of vaping. Some states have banned vaping altogether. Just this week, Kroger, one of the largest grocery chains in the U.S., announced they will no longer carry vaping materials in their store. No one really knows if CBD is safe or CBD has been put through the proper tests for FDA to ensure that it is not going to harm. I can certainly have a difference of opinion on what is good or bad business to permit in a neighborhood shopping center. I get that. What really blows my mind, however, is the article that I recently read in the Wednesday, September 4th, 2019 issue of Lake Country Now on page 22. There was a full-page article titled, New CB Stores Open in Delafield. The article was very interesting. It is refreshing to know that the owner is an expert in CBD oil, sarcasm alert. The article states that Stephanie Lemke first came across CBD in April. Wow, she's been into it 6 months already. It further states that Lemke took CBD training classes online and received a certification through CBD Training Academy. I wonder what ACT score you need to attend that academy. Getting down to business, here is the real reason that I wrote this letter. In the article, Lemke states the CBD comes from cannabis plant. The article then states CBD flower, the natural plant used for smoking, will be sold at the shop too. She said some of her customers who struggle with opiate addiction use this. It helps like a placebo, she said. It gives them a relief of CBD, but it is illegal. Pre-rolls of $10 each, 3.5 grams of it cost $25. Customers can place orders for up to a pound for $1,200. CBD vape cartridges, which Lemke said will help migraines will also be available. Are you kidding me? So we are attaching opioid abuse, we are attracting opioid abusers to Village Square. I am pretty sure that is a dumb idea. Soothing Senses is selling cannabis to smoke. She offers pre-rolled joints. She's selling them by the gram, and you could buy a pound for $1,200. She has CBD vaping cartridges, which are we allowing to be sold here. Did she explain to the Plan Commission and Common Council that she was going to be selling cannabis as pre-rolled joints? Did she ever mention that you can buy a pound for $1,200? I suppose that this is the water under the bridge. Chalk this one up to poor decision by the majority of Delafield's politicians. This is a bigger issue here than is where we can put a positive impact. We have a governor in Wisconsin who favors legalizing marijuana. It may take a year, it might take 5 years, but there is a good chance it is going to eventually happen. Please consider and be proactive in creating legislation or zoning that would not allow marijuana dispensaries in residential neighborhoods or within 2 miles of a school. That would limit where these stores could be placed in the city of Delafield. If you create a 2-mile radius around the school, that would protect downtown Delafield, Cushing Elementary, as well as Village Square, Divine Redeemer, Lake Country Lutheran, and Lake Country School and University Lake School. You have a chance to make a positive impact, be proactive, set the rules now. That way, if or when marijuana sales become legal, we will have rules in place to govern the sale and distribution. This is a very serious matter. Passing legislation now would save a lot of confusion if or when marijuana is legalized in Wisconsin.
Okay, you need to wrap it up. You're way over time.
I know. I pray that you see the wisdom in acting now. It is not too early by dealing with this issue now. Potential marijuana stores will know ahead of time where they can or cannot do business in the city of Delafield. We were not prepared for vaping. Let's be prepared for marijuana legalization. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. See no further citizens' comments. Citizens' comments are now closed. Oh, I'm sorry. Come on up. Didn't see you there.
You may not have heard.
Yeah, so you might not have heard my intro. There's some special rules tonight regarding citizens' comments regarding the gun club. If you speak about anything that's new, the planning commissioners are instructed not to take into consideration that information.
Actually, this is one comment about the
This is a backwards-looking process because of the legal issues involved. So you're free to speak. I just want you to understand it's different this time, right?
Well, it's more of a question.
Well, it's a one-way conversation. It's not really a question. We don't answer your questions. You're an old pro at this.
Right. Anyway, you know me, Bill Wisher. 2 comments, real short.
Your address, please.
One is about the gun club.
We need your name and address for them.
Bill Wisher, 231 South Latin Peak Road. Don't you have it memorized yet?
Still got to say it for the record.
Gun club. I tried to wade through the tome that was on the agenda. My question is, nowhere does it say anything about insurance to cover the city should something real accident really happens. I see all kinds of prohibitions and everything else, but nothing about coverage. Now, it may be implied, but I didn't see anything, that says hours and everything else. But if somebody gets shot and the gun club goes belly up, we have the city of Delafield and it's on our turf. That's the question. The other one is about, of course, our very favorite subject, changing the zoning for the A1 to B5, of which I have no objections. And I'm assuming that's the only part that's going to happen for recommendations tonight, for which I am done.
Great. Well, thank you for coming and thank you for your comments. All righty. Are there any ones I'm missing? Seeing none, citizens' comments are now closed. We'll move on to item 5A, unfinished business items. Recommend for discussion and possible action. Roger, you want to help us out with that?
Sure. The one item for unfinished business this evening is your consideration, Plan Commission, to either, to take action either to deny the current petition for the Henderson proposal or to accept their extension for action. As it is, this project was kicked off in April or May. We made a recommendation eventually in July, which affords us 90 days. They gave, knowing that we wouldn't be able to satisfy that, they have already given us one extension that extends through the end of October. The entirety of this project is contingent upon resolution and modification of our existing ordinances, which we are drawing closer to, but we are not going to have those completed before the end of October, which is tomorrow. So we've asked the petitioner to offer up another extension. It's up to your discretion whether you would like to accept their extension or have them start over from scratch. Regardless of your decision this evening, the next time we hear from them, they will have to have modified their site plan to be in accordance with our new zoning code requirements, which is pending yet, and we will conduct another public hearing, because by ordinance, if we go longer than 90 days since the last public hearing, we get a second public hearing. So it's up to you how you want to proceed.
I appreciate their patience, and I'll make a motion to accept their willingness to extend the
Tim, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I appreciate their patience, and I'll make a motion to extend the application for 90 days.
Second.
No, it's not 90 days. They've extended through the end of February. They've given us
We withdraw the second,
No, I read the letter.
but we're asking to change the motion.
Okay, that's fine.
You withdraw the
Motion through the end of
second
February.
through the end of February.
The motion is through the end of February.
and schedule another public hearing?
And schedule the public hearing.
Which will be triggered upon their next
I
resubmit.
understand.
Okay, so is there a second for that one?
Now, is there a second?
Second.
Great, thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Great, thank you much. Move on to 6A, new business. Roger, you want to help us out with 6A?
Sure, 6A. This is University Lake School. This is the public hearing that we had conducted earlier this evening where there were no comments. The petitioner is here to address any of your questions. I can reiterate for you the status. This is a project that was proposed, and we reviewed it in concept last month and scheduled a public hearing for this evening. This is to accommodate a small wood structure in the woods that is intended to be operated as a nature classroom. It has no utilities run to it. It does not impinge on any of the natural topography or native vegetation. They've strategically selected a space where it could be put up without taking down any mature trees. There were no comments by the Planning Commission or the citizenry at the last meeting. I would encourage your consideration to approve it, and approve it as a modification to their existing site plan with a one-page amendment to their conditional use, which is in your packet, and recommend it to council accordingly.
All right, is there a motion or discussion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve, amend the conditional use permit, site plan, and architecture, and recommend the common council the same.
Second.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none? Are you good? You got the motion?
I was saying yes to Roger, I'm sorry.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
Hang on, this, just who seconded that motion?
Robert, I think.
Okay, thank you.
All right, 6B. Roger?
Purple Dog Storage. First of all, I think this gets the award for the most creative business name in the city. This is the property that is immediately south of 5 Alarm. Jerry Fleischer is the applicant. This is a property that has been encumbered with an incredibly steep slope, a lot of topography, and a lot of existing vegetation that renders half of this property undevelopable. As a result, Mr. Fleischer is trying to figure out some economic gain that he could perhaps attain from the property. offering to establish a boat and utility storage, which is allowable in the district. However, staff recommended to him to consider executing a certified survey map so as to combine this parcel with the existing parcel that 5 Alarm sits on. The reason being, the outdoor storage is an accessory use, and without a primary use, we can't hardly approve it. So by combining the 2 lots, it becomes essentially an extension of the primary use, which is the 5 Alarm fire equipment on the northern part of the lot. So for your consideration this evening, I would encourage you to consider approving the consolidation of the CSM and recommending that to the council, contingent on engineers' review. The situation with consolidations, city engineer has recommended that rather than them conducting 2 reviews, they get your approval for the consolidation, and they conduct 1 review prior to the council meeting. Because when it comes to consolidation, all you're doing is removing the interior property lines. The other aspect is, for your consideration, the business plan of operation, which has been detailed in the packet, identifies the hours of operation. They're very insignificant. The site plan identifies the improvements on the property. Improvements on the property will be, or are proposed to be, a chain link fence. There's hardly any other improvements on the site other than the addition of a driveway and the use of an existing gravel drive. It's not proposed to be paved, which Planning Commission has the ability to approve such operation without requiring pavement. So there are 3 items for your consideration. You got CSM, you got business plan of operation, and site plan improvements.
I have a question. There's a picture of a fence in here with some screening elements to it. It looks like this is around an electrical box or a dumpster or something. Is that the type of fence that's proposed around the entirety of the structure, or just along certain sides, or
That's the fence proposed around the entirety of the structure.
Yeah, we spent a significant amount of money.
Name and address.
Jerry Fleischer, 5 Alarm, 350 Austin Circle. About 4 years ago, we spent about $250,000 upgrading our property, and I don't want to do anything that degrades our property or any of our existing neighbors. So the idea for a chain link fence, whether it be a 6-foot or an 8-foot, was to have some type of decorative slatting through it. So aesthetically, it blends with my current property.
I'm not sure you need it along the south edge with all the trees and the slope.
Okay.
Just saying if you can throw that money into whatever else you'd need to pretty something else up.
Yeah, I remember for certain.
I'm just saying, I don't know that you'd want to invest in it in the back, on the south side, on the slope.
Security is one of the things that I've looked at.
I agree with the fence. I'm just saying, I don't know if you need
He's
to.
talking about the slats.
If any money you're putting into making something look nicer, spend on the sides that are affecting your neighbors is what I'm proposing. So if there's a budget item that shows that you're paying for slatting on the backside, maybe you weren't planning on doing that, but.
The original budget is for slatting all 4 sides.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just suggest throwing the money, and maybe you won't, but I don't know why you'd want to put the screening on the south with the trees. Just put it into the business. Is my suggestion, but I just want to know what that was for.
Thank you.
I get it.
So I had one question. When we have applicants come in and build buildings, we are really concerned about what could be seen from the freeway. So like when somebody has an air conditioner unit or something on top of there, we try to get them to put, cladding or whatever the right word is so that we can't see that equipment up there. I'm having a hard time telling because it's fairly close to the building, will people from the highway be able to see the storage, do you think? Or you think the building's going to kind of block that from the site of the freeway?
I think the building blocks, I would say probably 80% of the backyard, the back property. The dead trees along I-94 will block the rest of that. So it's pretty hard to see. I mean, you'd have to stop on the freeway to actually take a good look to say, oh, that's a storage facility. So I haven't.
I mean, you live there. I'm going to take your word for it, right? I mean, you're saying 80% of the stuff from the freeway, you don't think you'd be able to see in the storage area?
Our property line, I think, goes out to the middle portion of Austin Circle. And Austin Circle from the freeway, you can probably only see, I would estimate maybe 10, 15 feet of that. Our building blocks that whole back lot pretty well.
And that's why I'm taking your word for it, because it's hard for me to tell from what I'm looking at, right?
Yeah, and the whole thing is, I want to do something that, one, we can generate revenue and utilize that property, because we bought it originally for our extrication school that we do once a year, and I want to do something that's aesthetically pleasing, not to detract our building or from our building or any of our neighbors.
Will you still be able to conduct the extrication?
My idea is we are going to plan on having occupancy from the end of May through April 1st. So the property will be vacant for 30 days, so we can still hold our extrication school and still use that property.
Great, thanks. Any other questions for the applicant?
Motion to approve, recommending the certified survey map to the Common Council contingent upon the city engineer's review and approval, and also approving the business plan of operation as presented in our packet along with the site plan.
I'll second.
All right, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
And Dan, I just wanted to confirm that motion was to recommend to the Common Council also,
Yep.
correct?
Thank you.
Great,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on to 6C. Roger, KB Investments.
Sure, the petitioner is here this evening. This is rather straightforward and simple site plan modification, and I'm trying to get to the site plan here to identify for everyone. The architect is here to probably explain this better than I, but what has happened is that in the original plans that were approved, we had a series of parking spaces that were land banked along what would be the east side of this drive. Because of engineering concerns, the amount of topography in place, those land bank spaces have been relocated back here to the back side of the building. Now, whether or not they'll ever be used is up to what type of operation there is in this building, but currently Mr. Barker does not have a need for them. That's why they were allowed to be land banked. As a result of the topography, the client or the applicant is also asking us to consider modification of the retaining walls that had been designed for the site. These retaining walls, which were originally intended to suspend these parking spaces, which have been displaced, is now extended and tiered so as to, rather than be a 12-foot tall wall, it's a series of smaller walls. They do extend into the front setback. Plan Commission is required to give specific approval for retaining walls that are in setbacks, and specifically if they're greater than 18 inches within that setback. It just so happens that this lowest tier is at 18 inches. The second tier is greater than 18 inches, and therefore it requires your approval. Along with the changes to these walls, the associated landscaping has changed, although to date there hasn't been any proposed changes to the tree mitigation, which was rather extensive, as you remember from the first time this was presented to us. With that, Sean, is there anything I forgot?
No, I think you really covered most of it. I think the real intention here was, when our last submission or approval at Plan Commission, it was really just a singular retaining wall, very simple landscape blocking, more of an economy solution. Whereas this is well above and beyond. If you have a chance to look at it, it looks fantastic. And really the space between these retaining walls is to ease that transition of grade and also allow for landscape beds, which you mentioned the landscape did change, again, adding landscape to those beds. So really, everything has been an improvement from what was there before. Unfortunately, through the mix of everything, we did not catch that setback encroachment prior to meeting with the staff. It was built ahead of time, so without our knowledge. So essentially, when we met with you guys, we discussed it, and the staff was fine with everything else, if I'm correct, Roger, except
Yes.
obviously the encroachment. So since it's already in place, we're just asking that that can stay, since the rest of this has really been for the improvement of the property.
Any questions for the applicant or a motion?
What is the setback right now?
5 feet.
With the setback is
Setback's
30, it's a 30-foot setback and we're within 5
Yeah.
feet.
Okay.
We're right here, so here's your line right there, and then we're encroaching right in this
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
area right there.
Got that. I wanted to know
So
what
it's about
the
5 feet.
Yeah, 30,
dimension was.
30 feet, yep. So we're still fairly far
We're
off.
25 feet off,
Yeah.
but it's a 30-foot requirement, so I'm in at 5 feet too much. But for looks and practicality, looks, when you drive up, it looks really, it follows the contour nicely. We had water laterals through there, sewer lines through there, utilities. It was like, in a previous plan, we had all those parking spaces and they were banked right underneath where this wall would be for future. But the wall was like right here in the first side. And I'm like, if I ever had to put future parking, I'd have to undermine the wall and take it all out.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to do that, so I moved them all to the back side of the building, which is a better solution anyways, because you've got a real ample amount in the front, plus you've got more ample amount in the front if you needed it, and then split it up in the back, because the building is, well, it's multifaceted. We got 2 divisions that are running back and forth through it, so it helps out both ways. If I have to actually do that, parking would be good. To have it in both sections, an option to have back and front.
That little ear there.
This little guy right here,
Yeah.
that's
What-
only 18 inches tall.
no,
It's only one tier.
Does it come all the way out to that, where the curvature is or the cul-de-sac is?
The cul-de-sac actually is right here.
Right. I'm talking about that little ear right up at the top there.
This guy? Or no?
There, right there.
Right where
That's
the-
just grade.
That's
That's not a
just grade?
retaining. Yeah, that's
okay.
just grade.
It's a circle.
Oh, I
That's the
thought maybe it was a
cul-de-sac.
No.
planting bed.
No, we're not going that far.
No.
No,
Okay.
because this is not in the right-of-way, it's on
And
your
again,
property.
It's on my
I mean,
property.
honestly,
Yeah.
It's just encroaching into the setback.
The setback, yeah, not on the street or anything close.
One other benefit to this layout is that the driveway was actually altered. Originally, this driveway, it took that from on the north side and the drive on the south side came together and then out to the cul-de-sac. Now that they've reshaped it, they've separated the drive so it's a little bit less ambiguous and you can figure out which drive you're supposed to be in as you approach the building.
I'll have to go and take a look at it. Looks interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I like the layout.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the landscaping change as presented.
The encroachment.
Yeah.
The encroachment, yes.
And the amended site plan?
Can you
And the amended
recommend
site-
council that?
And recommend to
It
council.
doesn't have to go to
No,
council, this is
not
simple
that.
No,
site plan.
we're good.
Sorry.
We get to do this by ourselves? All right, let's do this, let's do this by ourselves. I
Off the
recommend
training
to
wheels.
approve the
Training
encroachment
wheels
as
are gone.
presented.
All right.
I'm sorry, who was the second?
Second.
Jim. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks,
gentlemen.
good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for continuing to build in the city of Delafield. Okay, we'll move on to 6D. Roger? Or
Sure.
Jim? Should I give this to Jim?
Well, let me explain what I need to first, and
Okay.
then they can address questions to Jim. The Heartland Sportsman's Club, this is a project that I'm sure all of you remember, or at least a little bit familiar with, in that they operated under a conditional use. Conditional use was revoked a while back, and it's been an ongoing process through the courts and a series of appeals that the Heartland Sportsman's Club is pursuing a continued operation in the city. Through the court and the recommendations mandated by the court, we are, the city, to permit and approve a conditional use permit. Staff has worked with a number of people in-house to take what was originally proposed by the applicant in, I believe it was 2008, modify it to satisfy some of the issues that we were concerned with, and present it to you this evening for consideration. Now, action is not required this evening, but only if you're comfortable with it, and that action would be to recommend this to council for action. There were some changes in the CU that I just wanted to point out for everyone's information. Going through the sections, we had reiteration of 75-foot separation from residential property lines that needs to be continued to be exercised. A need for lead remediation, which has always been part of the program. The city requests signage around the perimeter of the property of warning of the dangers, as well as a security fence to keep pedestrians from wandering into the site. Section 8 identifies the type of activities that can be conducted, and they're pretty consistent with what we all understand the operations out there are. Section 9 addresses noise abatement issues. Furthermore, we go on to identify the necessity in Section 9 for baffles and bullet catchers to do everything we can to collect rounds that are trying to get where they're not supposed to be. Section 11 affects the hours of operation. This has been revised. Originally, I believe it was 26 hours that had been increased at one time, and now we're proposing back to 34 hours, which we believe is very, very, very generous and conforms to their operational requirements. Section 12 deals with the certification of range officers and their impact and ability to control usage of the property on the site. I would recommend to you to share with staff this evening any of your concerns in regards to the actual conditional use, if there's things you'd like to see changed or modifications made to it. I'd like to point out to you in preparation of the conditional use and inclusion in the packet, there were some items listed in red. You may have caught those as you read through it. Those were the last revisions added. Since the CU was issued in the packet, we've modified some of those, and I'd like to point those out. On page 5, section 2, this is regards to the tax exemption status. The actual ordinance calls for non-commercial, which we are defining as not to be open to general public. Rather than tax exempt, which is an assumption that we had been making for many years, the actual ordinance identifies it as non-commercial. And it also is established in the CU that the amount of area, that the usage of the property would be limited to club members and one guest. So in order for them to operate leagues or such, it would just be one guest per club member and not open to the public. That would indeed constitute an operation that is commercial.
So that's it comes out.
Yeah, so I just want to identify that should come out of the CU this evening.
So which one does?
Page 5.
Page 5.
So under 4?
Under 4,
okay.
Number 2 in there.
Yeah. So that, just number 2 comes out, the rest stays in?
The rest stays in.
Okay.
The next one is page 10. There's actually a typo there. It should be firearm ranges, not fire-arm. Please consider that in your recommendation for any action this evening. On page 15, in regards to range officers, there is new wording for that, which I don't have right here in front of me. Jim, do you? What you proposed? While Jim is looking for that, let me jump you ahead then to page 16, which is under sections 14, Plan Commission review and approval. The last sentence there is in regards to reimbursement. After researching this, the HSC is up to date with all of their fees. They don't owe the city anything at this point. So that can be stricken as well.
So as far as that
Range officer.
Range officer, I think that language in red is duplication and superfluous, because it says exactly what, it just simply restates what's in front of it. If you read the first part of that paragraph, it says no activity may take place on the property unless a certified range officer is present at the location the activity is being conducted and supervises and monitors the activity during the period of time the activity is being conducted. So that means that a range officer can't supervise his or her own activity. I don't think there's any need for that additional 2 sentences that we're adding in red. If you want to leave it in, you can, but I think it already prohibits what is outlined there.
So with those recommendations, I would encourage you to give this due consideration. It's up to your discretion if you'd like to see changes, additions, or modifications to it. You're welcome to have this come back if you'd like another month to deliberate it. But it's also, we are able to send this directly to Common Council if you choose to do that as well. It might also be noted, as the mayor was noting, we can't take any citizens' comments into effect. We are also not obligated to conduct a public hearing, but rather the merits of this move forward with the existing case file as it exists.
So there's no 90-day
No,
window on this?
not on this one.
I'm going to ask to be recused. I am too close to this subject. I have advocated for the club. I have many. I'm sorry. I am going to recuse myself. I'm very close to the subject. I have advocated support for the club, and I have many friends at the club, so I'm going to recuse myself.
Okay, so noted.
Can I ask questions on the
Sure, do you want
Anything in the
definition
document?
section?
Anything in the document?
Okay. How are the definitions that are listed there, how are they come up? I looked up some of these last night on ATF website and Wisconsin Justice website, and definitions are not correct on a couple of these. Noted firearms, it states here, shall mean shotguns and all calibers or rifles except rimfire rifles. Definition actually is firearm means a weapon that acts by force of gunpowder. So it does not exclude rimfire cartridges. Handguns, it states here, shall mean pistols and rifles. Those have separate definitions, they're not the same. A rifle is not a handgun by how the manner of that item is used. Handguns are by single or dual hands, rifles are by shoulder or by hip. By definition, like I said, through Wisconsin Justice and ATF. Also, rimfire rifle shall mean any rifle that discharges .22 caliber or less projectiles. Rimfire can be used also in handguns. I just want to make sure that we're covering that and not just saying a rifle, but also if you're going to denote the cartridge itself. Also, be careful about saying .22 caliber or less. There are rimfire cartridges from the late 1800s, they're black powder, of 45 caliber and 56 caliber. And being a black powder would probably fall under somewhat of guidance of discharging a black powder rifle at the range. So unless black powder is prevented from being used at the range, just be careful about saying only .22 caliber, because there are cartridges out there larger than that come under the proper guidance of rimfire.
Okay, so I understand there's a distinction between a pistol and a revolver. I own one of each. But the definitions here aren't intended to be definitions. They're intended to be definitions that apply to this conditional use. And so, like, for example, there's nothing in this conditional use that authorizes black powder or muzzle loaders. I didn't think that was part of the application, or staff didn't when we were going through it. So that's why it's tailored to this conditional use. So these definitions relate to the activities being described in this use, and they may not be a definition that's precise or exact as that term might be used generally. That's why they're in here. And for example, rimfire, we use rimfire rifle because we use that definition and we identify the rimfire ranges. If the intent is to allow rimfire, 22 handguns, then that definition could be changed to say rimfire handguns or rifles. But again, bearing in mind that we were trying to tailor these definitions based on what the application was in this particular conditional use, and they may not, as I said, be as precise or all-encompassing as you might otherwise use that term.
Should we be precise? And the reason I say it that way is if we're not precise in the wording and something happens and we've approved that wording, I'm not a lawyer, but I think
He is.
I think we're giving ourselves reason to be liable somewhere. And I'm trying to make sure that we're comfortable and legal with the wording, not that an accident possibly could happen, let's say. You never know.
Well, it's fine, but if you,
And I just want to make sure that it's worded correctly.
right, but if you want to change the definition, then that's necessarily going to involve change in the body of the conditional use permit as well. Because, as I said, the definitions are carried throughout the conditional use permit.
I understand. I'm not comfortable with it being an inaccurate definition.
And that's why it's before you tonight. So what would you like to see as far as definitions? Would you like to, can you give us the wording of a definition on, that you want to use for?
I have it I printed it out.
Okay.
I can pass it along to you.
Okay.
It's
And
also
again,
got
they were on
It's
what?
also got the statutes that go along with it. I just feel it's safer for both parties
Okay.
to have something.
And those definitions, what, related to handguns?
You've got firearm definition, handgun, pistol, rifle, and rimfire ammunition.
Well, again, I guess maybe we need some input from the club on this, but if the rimfire that is ammunition that's being used there is .22 caliber or less, that's what the conditional use permit would authorize. It wouldn't authorize some other caliber that might be within the definition of rimfire from 50 years ago.
Right, I understand it says rimfire rifle, so I'm just questioning why it's not stating also handgun. Instead of specifically saying rifle,
Well, it's not,
define it as just that type of ammunition being used.
okay. Isn't that, let me just take a look. Isn't that the 100-yard range, that rimfire? Isn't it? Okay. And is it the intent to use handguns, rimfire, .22 caliber or less, at the rimfire range?
Probably not, but that's the silhouette range is usually.
You talk in the microphone,
Yeah,
please.
Mike, why don't you? Again, just,
And I need you folks, since you're going to speak now, to please give us your name and address.
My name is Mike Saitars. I'm president of the Heartland Sportsman's Club. I live at W312 in 1055 Fairfield Way, Delafield. The silhouette range is what you're probably referring to as a rimfire range, and the silhouette's shooting steel silhouettes, and that's usually rifle.
okay, but that's the point, the application is for rimfire rifle, .22 caliber or less.
On that range, but on
That's right.
On the 50-yard range, you could shoot any kind of pistol or revolver you want.
But on the rimfire range, it's
just
20, rifle, 22
ri-
caliber or less.
22 rifle, that's all we
Okay, so
allow.
it's restricted to rifle only.
Rifle only,
You could use a
22
pistol,
cal.
but the point is that it's for an accuracy type of situation, so you naturally use a rifle.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
You know.
We appreciate the question. Don't
No.
get us wrong.
But
right?
again, that goes
No,
back.
I'm not. You're
Right.
filling me in on information too.
Yeah, that's why that definition said rimfire rifle,
Okay.
22 caliber or less. Okay. So we got the definitional, we can tweak the definitions, and then that may require some other changes as we go through the
Yeah.
content of it, so.
And the wording for one other comment, I guess, on the wording of range officer.
Yes.
Are you looking at the NRA definition? Is that a range safety officer?
Yes.
By proper-
Range-
okay.
yes.
So that should say instead of range officer, range safety officer? As a proper
Semantics,
definition?
I mean, it'd be NRA trained, yes.
Yeah. It's just through NRA training that I'm familiar with it. Range safety officer is the definition being
RSO,
used.
right.
RSO, yeah.
If I may, Stacy Rosenzweig calling in KOSC on behalf of the club as well. At least as the draft appears here, there's multiple paths to becoming a range officer for the purpose of this, and so the NRA has a range safety program, but other programs may qualify as well. So I think it appears that the range safety officer is perhaps not a trademark, but a term of art to the NRA that may be more specific than is needed for the other programs that are going to be accepted, sort of thing. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are those detailed anywhere in here? What acceptable
Paragraph,
certification program?
paragraph 12, second paragraph. So we will add the word safety. It'll say range safety officer throughout, but paragraph 2 would read, range safety officers must be certified by attending and successfully completing an NRA-sponsored range safety program. Well, it says range officer safety program, civilian marksman program, USPSA National Range Officers Institute certification, or other industry-recognized program approved by the city.
All right, I have one issue I'd like to bring up. I think we need to, in section 8A under archery.
Yes, 8.
I think we have a wording issue with the restrictions, and this may be a transcription error in our own code, where we talk about on 7, where we're citing our own code,
Yeah.
9027,
Right.
under section 7B2.
I'm sorry, what page is that?
It's on page 8.
Thank you.
This page.
I'm working off 2 different ones.
Page 8.
Page 8.
So it's 7B2 is the reference to our own code, but it's under section 8A.
Yeah.
If that's not too confusing. But I think, like I said, I think this is a transcription error in our own code where we may need to correct our own code. And if instead of maybe doing that, we could strike this reference to our code and correct the wording here.
Okay.
Where it says throwing, shooting, or hunting with bow and arrow, crossbow on private property is only allowed if the arrow or bolt from the respective weapon is discharged toward the ground, or
Yeah, it should say not likely, right?
or if the arrow bolt of the respective weapon when discharged is not likely or reasonably likely to.
Right.
So we're missing a word "not" right before likely.
Right.
Like I said, I think something got truncated, and either we need to change the code or
Right.
add that wording here and not reference the code.
All right, well, that'll be corrected.
So I'd like that change. And I've got a question about the non-commercial status
Yes.
section under section 4 on page 5.
Yes.
And this is just a question regarding whether we, how the documentation of a list of club members satisfies the non-commercial status. Like, do we do this for? I'm just curious. If
Well,
we do this for other clubs or
I'm not aware of any other, do we have no other CUs under this section, right?
No, I don't believe
So, I guess, and this is an interpretation that comes from Roger, but obviously it's up to the Plan Commission to review and determine it. But as Roger pointed out, in the past, there's been a lot of discussion about not-for-profit status, whether the club was not-for-profit. Well, and I think that representation has been made that it's not-for-profit. I think that's the case. But the point being is that the code doesn't, the zoning code doesn't use the word not-for-profit. The code says that a conditional use is authorized for non-commercial clubs and outdoor recreational facilities. So non-commercial is I guess the example I would use would be a private golf course, right? A private golf course that is limited to members is a non-commercial club. It's not open to the public, whereas a commercial enterprise is open to the club. I think that Waukesha Gun Club over off of 164, anybody can go to that. That would be a commercial operation. No membership, you can just go there, pay your fee, use the facility. This conditional use is limited to non-commercial. And so that's the reason that the staff thought in putting this together, and again, just, this is a draft for your review and consideration, is to articulate that non-commercial, the requirement is it is for members and that you have to have a membership roster. I have no idea how many members the club has today, whether they have a membership roster, whether they have initiation fees, whether they have annual dues, I have no idea. But they have to have a membership roster, and then because it is non-commercial, I mean, you should be able to invite guests, but it's limited to 1 guest per day per activity, as opposed to 1 member invites 10 guests or something along those lines. And again, the idea being to be consistent with your conditional use sections, which allow conditional use for non-commercial activities.
So the purpose of maintaining a roster in the city's possession is to audit in the case of a complaint or an issue and just demonstrate that they're not...
Demonstrate that the person utilizing the facility is a member,
Okay.
or that the guest is there with the member and there's a guest roster. Otherwise, there's no way of being able to monitor those activities.
Can I comment about this provision, please?
Just a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, so following that up, like we do with some other, I'm trying to think of an example where we do with like financials on like city assessments, where we'll get financials for board of review, we'll have those
Right.
under, we'll maintain, essentially they're submitted to the city, but they're not a public record, where they're not open for public. I mean, if this is strictly for audit purposes, there's a reason that, I'm assuming this would mean that we've got a membership roster that would be a public document for anyone to inspect at any time.
If it's filed with the city.
Would it be, I would be more comfortable with this provision if we had it, that this was a document that would maintain the...
To use the same language as a guest roster, that it's open and available for inspection by the city upon request as opposed to being filed?
Correct.
Okay.
I don't see why we need to maintain a list of people that's a public record for anyone and everyone to see. And not that anyone has anything to hide, I don't think that's appropriate.
Okay. I think in its past practice, allow applicant to speak in on these issues.
Right. Well,
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is one of several provisions in this proposed CUP, which the club and I have not had a real chance to study. The club is a going concern. It has members. It has people who make decisions. The first time we have seen this has been through this packet that was released late Friday. On a first read, just from my own perspective, there are a lot of provisions in this that seem very new. If you recall, the various courts have held that the 2013 denial of the CUP application was invalid. So we have a CUP application going back to 2011.
Well, I take issue with that characterization, counsel. Okay. The court said that it was the articulation of the reasons wasn't sufficient, therefore it was arbitrary.
It was arbitrary.
So, that's why we're back here.
That's why we're back at the Court of Appeals. But in any case, we have a court order relating back to the 2011 CUP application, which was also referenced in this draft. So I think this body also understands that that's the operative document, that's what we're working for. A lot of these provisions go kind of far afield from anything that was discussed back in 2013 when this CUP should have been issued in the first place. With regard to the provisions about the non-commercial status, again, on my first read, I have not had a lot of time to review this, given the fact we haven't been provided with a copy of it. The one member, one guest ratio, I didn't find any basis for that in any law, any ordinance suggesting that's what constitutes a non-commercial operation. I understand your perspective in that there does need to be some sort of limit to what constitutes a non-commercial operation, but it's common. If somebody's a member of a private golf club, they can bring the other 3 members of the foursome to do business. So I don't know where where that number came from. What I'd like to suggest, if this body is amenable, is that my colleague Scott Burns is he's out of town, unable to be here. He's the he's our land use and real estate person, that he and a representative from the club sit down with you folks and talk about some of these things, to try to get them to conform with where things stood in 2013, and get them, frankly, conformance with the law and conformance with what the club is capable of doing. Some of these provisions, I think, such as full perimeter fencing, are not feasible given the fact that some of the perimeter of the club is in protected lands that we can't bulldoze trees and erect fences. So things like that need to be discussed, and I think it's a better use of everybody's time if it's discussed directly as opposed to we go line by line at a public meeting like this and try to pick out what needs to happen, what's not, and then come back to the body with a more appropriate document.
Well, certainly, if you have comments on it, I think the easiest way, excuse me, the easiest way to address the matter would be to have your comments put in writing so staff can review them, because the process, and this is not, you're not being treated any differently than anybody else, is that what happens with conditional uses in the city is that's after the public hearing and the input, staff puts together a recommendation and like to have a draft of it so you know what you're dealing with. So if you could get those comments to us, I think that would be helpful for everybody.
And we would be happy to do so,
right.
Now that we have at least
right.
a working draft here.
But I don't think, again, I don't know what your issues are, but I don't think there's anything in this draft that when we sat down and went through it, that wasn't the subject of discussion at the various hearings or meetings. For example, the fencing, I know Mr. Aker in particular, I remember you commenting on the need for fencing and the likelihood of people entering the property with, during these activities. So all of these issues were discussed.
Right, and fencing was an issue back in 2011 to 2013 as well, but certain aspects of what's in this document may not have been, and may, or maybe just simply infeasible given the state of the land as it has stood for the last several decades.
Well, are there any other specific concerns tonight?
I can do a few bullet points tonight. Some of them have been addressed with regard to the non-commercial. We already discussed that, and the fencing, and your recommendation of removing the language regarding the range officer supervising himself. That's already been addressed in this meeting. Some of the hours were of operation. Some of what those were, I think, different from 2013.
Well, they're different in the application.
Different from the application,
right.
But the application, I don't think we got to that point of amending the hours or suggesting different hours. So these are things that we can that I think are worthy of discussion. Let's see. And with regard to the professional services prepayment, that's already been addressed. That was another thing on my bullet point list. I have others, but again, we have not had a full opportunity to vet this and compare it to the past. But we'd be happy to do so and put it in writing.
Okay.
What I'd like to add, I agree. Thanks for bringing up the when we go back in time and think about how we're here today, but where we're at today, fencing was clearly an issue, and it was not just that. It was safety in general, and some of what we did not know and what was not presented to us as fact and was conjecture at the time was very concerning and alarming. And we just just to address the fencing, since it's fresh and just brought up, we just had an applicant who was proposing a storage area, and they've got a fence that's protecting boats from people, and we're asking for a fence to protect people from bullets, right?
We're not
and I think that's,
okay.
But so this is part of the reason that I think this document is what it is because we're dealing with a denial that's put back on us to come up with safety contingencies that are necessary, and this is what our first swipe was from my opinion, and I think it does need a little bit of need more eyes and a little bit of work. But it's possible that this one-to-one guest per member requirement may not necessarily be in the right heading here with non-commercial status, but should be in a safety provision near where the range officers are, because you're dealing with someone, a guest, who's under the guidance of a safety officer who's familiar with, so you've got one member who's familiar with the shooting and the property, bringing other people that aren't necessarily. What's a reasonable limitation on that? And one-to-one seems appropriate to me. And I think that's as much of a safety provision as it is somebody trying to charge fees, because very likely it's a recruiting drive and you're trying to bring people in to say, hey, check out my club, I want you to join. Don't bring 20 at once. Don't bring 20 people that may not even be familiar with a handgun. That might be too much for a single range officer to handle if you've got 18 members bringing 20 guests at once. One-to-one makes sense. So I think that's as much a safety thing, and maybe it's just under the wrong heading, but it belongs there as well as anywhere else. So I just want to comment on those two things.
Good comments.
I have one thing on that. Jim, because it would be a public record, we're talking about the people who come there.
Right.
With the city, I think there should be some agreement or language who would be the custodian of those records so that they can be accessed by the public through a custodian, that there's no question about that.
So do you think that the membership should be a public record or not?
That's my view, yes.
Would a golf club be required to disclose its membership?
No, I don't think.
No.
Yeah. That's something with which my client would have significant problems, I believe. I understand your concerns regarding this being a commercial versus non-commercial venture.
I would agree. I don't see the need for it to be a public record. A record that's available, but not public.
I think record that's available is in the existing conditional use from the 90s.
But even if that's the case, you still need somebody who would be the custodian of the record.
Custodian of the record.
That's my point. That was the main impetus of my question.
Right. We would have designated, we can do a designated custodian. The hours of operation, that are put out here for your consideration, obviously they don't follow an application. The determination of hours of operation, as I point out, or as staff pointed out in there, is a function of considering the impact that the use has on the adjoining properties as well. You have to balance both of them, and that is how the staff came up with the types of hours that were there in the days and limiting it on weekends and so on to minimize the type of interference that has been experienced in the past. But again, those are, we put something together based on the comments that were made, that we heard and what we read. You have to decide where you go from there. But I don't think there's anything in here that, as I said, wasn't the subject of discussion by the Plan Commission, the council, or at public hearings.
In broad terms, perhaps, but in specifics, I think we're disagreeing on a lot of these things. And again, we will submit our comments in writing and make them.
Okay, so everybody can be on the same page. What I'll do is Roger and I will take the document that's in front of you. You, don't mean just you, everybody here tonight. Anybody who wants to access it. We will do a revision, a red line revision, based on the comments tonight. A few things like safety officer and so on. Make those changes. Take out the ones that we talked about. We will provide the Plan Commission members with I'll submit it to the city, have it distributed to Plan Commission members, and I'll send a copy of council to you. I assume, Mike, you don't need one. I just send it to Stacy?
That's good enough.
Okay. And then if anybody in the public wants to view it, it'll be on file at the city clerk's office. That'll be done by early next week. You will have that. But then I would appreciate if you would get your comments back to us so that staff can take a look at them and provide some insight to the Plan Commission. We will share with the Plan Commission their comments, and then we'll come up with perhaps if adjustments are needed or some suggested language based on those comments, we'll put those together so that the Plan Commission will have the revised draft, have their comments, as well as the red line, and you'll have it a week or so before the next meeting so you can go through it. If anybody on the Plan Commission, as you go through this, has additional thoughts or questions or comments, please send your notes to Roger. Don't copy, as I think was Roger said, don't copy everybody because you got an open meetings issue if you do that. But if you have other questions or comments as we go through this the next month, send them to Roger and we'll do the best we can to address them before the next meeting.
One more thing, there are 3 typos on here that I think, should I just address that with Roger?
Yeah, please.
I have some comments.
Yes.
Especially for you, Jim. I'm not a lawyer, but as I went through this, I'm wondering if we aren't being too detailed or prescriptive on some of the baffle details, the plans, the shooter curtains. If we won't tell them how to do that and there's a failure, are we not more into liability than if we did make it outcome-based and let them come tell us how they're going to keep bullets in the range?
Okay. So one thing I would point out to you is I made a note here to myself as I was going through these things. For example, on page, you got to see which one I got here. I got 2 drafts. Page 10 of your document, where it talks about it should say, I was thinking it should say, in substantial conformance with the following, as opposed to be in performance with it. The reason that this was drafted this way is because of past history. If you just say, and go back and look at the 1997 conditional use permit issued by the city. It said, within 1 year, the club will submit a sound abatement system. Okay. First of all, it wasn't submitted, but it wasn't submitted certainly timely. I think 8 years later it may have been, but which has nothing to do with this. But the point is if you just say a sound abatement system without some sort of parameters or details, and something is submitted, in fairness to the club, you say, no, that's not acceptable. They say, well, what's a sound abatement system? It handles it. It addresses what the concerns are. There's got to be some kind of identifiable criteria to determine whether or not the system being submitted conforms. And that's in particular, like if you look on page 11, that baffle system which shows the diagram, because there were several different types, to at least 2, probably 3 different types of systems that were talked about at the public hearings. If you just say, well, you'll submit this type of a system without some kind of detail, it's hard to do it. As far as liability, we're imposing conditions. It's up to them to then meet those conditions and impose that type of a system. I don't believe, in my opinion, the city doesn't incur, we all, at the public hearing, the comment was made, and I think it was made by Mr. Levinson. I know it was because I quoted in my brief to the Court of Appeals. There's no system that you can ever design that's going to guarantee a bullet doesn't leave that range, all right? So if you approve a conditional use allowing a sports shooting range, you don't open yourself up to liability because at some point in time, somehow, somewhere, no matter what you design, a bullet may leave the range. Your responsibility is to establish reasonable conditions that are designed or intended to do that. Someone always can come back later and say, well, you could have done this or you could have done that. It's a legislative function, what you're doing here, and I don't think the city would incur any liability, in my opinion.
That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is if we say to put up the shooter curtain, and that fails, and they said we put up what the city told us to put up, that's where I'm getting at. And been on this board since 2010, so I've been through all this. And I've brought up the baffles many times because I shoot at McMiller.
Right.
But those are vertically mounted plywood panels
Right.
that eliminate the blue sky. They have nothing to do with sound that I know of. It's to keep you focused on that.
That's
And-
what that is.
But in here, they talk about baffles and sound and the bullet cut catcher. So I think there's confusing terms in here. I believe you guys have proposed a mechanical device has a bullet catcher where the height of it can be changed. And I was more of an advocate of those baffles and no blue sky.
Okay.
So I was a little confused when I read this, and I thought maybe that needs to be cleaned up. And
Okay.
what happens if we tell them to put in this system and that system fails, rather than we say we want the sound reduced X amount of decibels, we don't want anything to leave the range, we want. I'm coming from my engineering world where we write specs and.
I know, but this is a hard one because
It is a hard one.
it'd be impossible to do a decibel.
I
So on
realize
this one,
that. I just threw that
right.
out there as an example of giving someone a level to meet.
Right.
Because
Well-
we could go through a lot of this and accept their sound deadening and the neighbors say, it's not any quieter.
Well, that's true, and I would suspect that that's going to happen no matter what. You're always going to have people.
That's what I'm getting at.
The idea here is, and Mayor Atwell asked Roger and I to work with Wayne, who's had experience doing this stuff, and with Jim Barron. And if you have particular knowledge or experience on some of these, that's what I said, let us know what your thoughts are, and we'll work them in there. I was looking at that as reading through this thing too and thinking maybe we need to separate the sound abatement and the baffle and the
Yeah, I
bullet
think there's
catcher, three of
confusion
them.
there over
Right,
the
I-
systems.
Again, I had a note on that already,
Okay.
so we'll make some of those changes.
Well, I remember too, and so this is a little bit tough because I remember, and I resent that this ended up being described as an arbitrary decision at the time, because upon very cursory questioning about the safety provisions that were presented to us back then, because I was on this board, at least I was on Common Council. It was asked if, given an amateur's shooting at the skeet range, would shot leave the property if it was at a certain angle that was like an errored angle? And they said yes. If we use this shot that's in the thing, it's like, well, at a minimum, you'd be littering on your neighbor's property, and we can't. No condition that wouldn't stand up to any part of our conditional use. That's not being a good neighbor, and that's what conditional use conditions are all about. And it was put back on us. I was asked a direct question. Well, what shot would you be comfortable with? And I'm like, well, I'm not a ballistics expert.
Right.
So it has been put in our court from the courts in some degree, and I appreciate the back and forth to arrive at something that would be the right conclusion. But I think that's why it exists the way it exists. Mm-hmm. We were told, well, you come up with something safe. You were told by the courts to do this, right? And
Right.
so I like the suggestion that it's in substantial conformity with something that's recognized as being a safe standard in the industry. I think that's a good place to start, and if they want to propose a modification, I think that's part of the conditional
Part of the
use
process.
So I'm all for some back and forth to see where this goes.
Danny, got anything else on your list?
I think some of my other comments have been covered. I guess one thing that, it's just a what if for you again, Jim. The courts say you got to give them a CUP. And we're drawing up the rules of the CUP. I'm assuming, obviously, you could get to a point where the CUP is so restrictive the client can't operate. Say, for example, we made their hours 2 hours a week or somewhere. Do they then go back to court and say?
Well, let's stay. I'd like to stay out of the legal part of what happens in the future.
Just something
For this to end up in court would be surprising.
I'm not criticizing this as being that. It's just a what if. I'm wondering about in general.
I think the answer to your question is simply this: is that we have in our zoning code a provision that allows for conditional uses to be it for non-commercial clubs and outdoor facilities. There's an application made for that. There are certain criteria that have to be met. One of them is that you can't have any building closer than 75 feet to a residential use, which we've addressed. The other conditions with any conditional use require a balancing of interest. You have to look at a conditional use is there for that very purpose. It's not absolutely permitted. So you have to do a balancing of interest, and the interests here, are this non-commercial activity is being requested, and you have to look at the adjoining business and residential property owners, future development, safety of the general public. And it's a balancing of those matters that you look at. I agree, if you said 2 hours a week, I think that would be arbitrary and unreasonable, okay? If you said 100 hours a week, I think you can make the same argument if you're on the other side. So that's why we looked at this from a staff level, came up with suggestions, and now it's in your court for the Plan Commission to take a look at it, and you have to make the recommendation to the council.
Sure, thanks.
Dave, Bob, anybody else got some questions? All right. So I think Jim outlined it quite well, how we're going to proceed forward.
Yeah. And then no action is taken, so it'll just be on the agenda for next month. When is?
It'll be on the agenda for next month, and we're going to get to that later in the meeting. We're going to pick an actual date.
Okay.
Did you have anything? I'm sorry. Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
No, I'll await the submission from Attorney Hammes and respond to mine.
Great. Well, we really appreciate you coming. Thank you very much.
Can I get a card?
I'm sorry?
I got it.
Okay, so we're going to move on to 7A, zoning and ordinance revisions. Roger.
Sure, there are a number of ordinance revisions on the agenda this evening. Is Laura back in here?
Yeah.
Oh, no, we need to get her
in here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think you gave me one. Oh, you gave it to her. Thank you.
Can we take a minute, Mayor?
You want to take a minute?
You need a minute?
Well, Laura's not
90
here.
seconds.
Oh, Laura left? Okay. 90-second stop.
You going where I'm going?
Yeah.
There's a World Series game on, folks.
Did you say a 90-second break?
90 seconds.
We can all stand up and stretch.
and the supervisor, the range officer.
These
It's gotta
are
be 3 all the
quick
time.
run-throughs, correct?
Oh,
That's what I think. That's what the intent is from what I can
I thought we were
gather.
going to have.
Okay, we're ready. We're going to be back on, folks. So if you could all please take your seats, it'd be greatly appreciated. We're reconvening and we're taking on item 7A, zoning and ordinance revision. Roger, if you could help us out.
I would be glad to. I think ideally I'd like to go through these one at a time, have a separate action item for each one.
Separate action item on each item. Are you on?
Turn your mic on. Mic is on. We have been requested to bring to your attention those items that we had on the agenda last month for revisions to the ordinance after being asked to modify the wording of the ordinance and the fact that we had not identified discussion and action for each of these following elements. So it's back on the agenda this month, identifying discussion and action, asking for your recommendations in the case of these ordinances. There are 5 of them, to recommend them to council, and I'd just like to run through them just very quickly. The first one is modification to Code 1724. This is in regards to definitions. This has been modified per comments last month, and it is ready to be forwarded to council. I would encourage your consideration to make that recommendation.
which one is this? And we're approving what's in red as the update? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve 7A, Section 1, update as presented.
This is my second.
Sorry.
Is that the one you have a question on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we need a second and then discussion,
Nobody wants a
right?
second?
So I'll second
Okay.
that.
You'll second it. In reading, it's on page 2, second paragraph. Every building erected, structurally altered, or relocated after the effective date of this. The problem I see with that is that I think there should be a modification to allow structural modifications internally. Because if there is if there's a house or a building that's over the amount of square footage allowed in our new square footage calculations, they couldn't even remodel on the inside of their house. So say you have a farmhouse and you want to do an open plan. Typically that'll require some kind of beam.
Load carrying beam, take out a wall.
Which is a structural calculation.
Yeah.
To get a permit. They can't do it.
Wouldn't that be a perfect thing to go to the boarding zone of appeals for? Because that's actually a financial hardship.
Why not just let the building inspector allow it?
Because they're over, you're saying, because they're over on that square
They're not adding,
footage.
they can't add any more square footage.
Right. They just want to open
They
it
just
up.
want to do they want to remodel their house or a building.
Interior.
Interior. Well, you can't expand it because you can't get any more square footage.
How would you word that?
I just have an exception to allow structural modifications.
Internal structural
Well,
modifications?
what if you want
or
to put,
just-
what if you want to put in a different window in the front of the house? You need another
Yeah.
beam. Just structural modifications, but you can't increase the square footage.
The devil's in the
And
wording.
what I also didn't want to see is somebody come in and they want to remodel their house, and okay, you can do it, but you got to chop 100 square feet off in order to meet the new square footage. Yeah, then they go to zoning appeal.
Yeah, right.
Board of Appeals.
And that's the case I was thinking of, is that.
But I'm thinking to allow the building, because that's another 30 days for somebody. If they want to remodel the inside of their house, they should be able to do it.
I just need I want the wording to be clear so it's understandable and that we don't inadvertently have language that somebody reads a different way, right? That's my only concern.
So you would say maybe after this period that accepting structural modifications that are exceeding the square footage?
Well, you can't exceed the square footage.
Well, I mean,
You're-
in structures that have a square footage that exceeds, I mean, I'd have to think about how to exactly word this, but I think, I see what you're saying.
Yes, that,
If the existing house has a greater square footage, we're saying you can't do anything internally.
right.
This is the wording we discussed previously today. Exception, structural alteration will be allowed to any structure permitted with excessive living space, height, or floor area. Keyword there is permitted, and we haven't touched
Yeah,
on that,
because
so.
I know there's a few places out there that they've.
Do it without a
they've-
permit?
They've done it above the garage and it was never supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, that,
Well, you're also, because I was concerned about having somebody, well, so are you creating a loophole for somebody to build something with the intent to immediately alter it? To not comply?
You mean in a new building?
In a new building?
No, they couldn't,
They
that
could?
would not be considered permitted because we're modifying the ordinance so they can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But you're building it in a way that is permitted, and then you're changing it in a way.
Yeah, but if the height is there.
The height's already there.
The heights are low enough that you can't, and if it is, it's counted in the
It's
square
counted as
footage
floor
now.
area.
Even if they don't,
Oh, all right.
even if they don't have the space finished out,
Right.
you count the square footage. We count it now.
I
Narrow to
like the,
existing
I like the wording. I mean, if someone gets in there, they're gonna find it the way that this is not gonna happen every day.
Right, yeah. And it's the person that's gonna all of a sudden go, gee, I just wanted to open my house up and now I can't.
Do an open floor
I got all
plan.
I got all kinds of loopholes to run through.
Could you narrow it to an existing building?
Well,
That's
yeah, it would be,
permitted.
it would be
Permitted.
any existing
Yeah.
building
Yeah.
because
That's
a
what
new
we're
one
talking.
has to abide by different rules, the new
Right.
rules.
Right.
So this essentially covers those structures that would be typically grandfathered,
Oh,
but we want to stipulate that it has to have been a permitted overage. You know, if somebody was changing the floor plan or putting additions on without permits,
yeah,
sorry, you kind of messed it up for yourself.
yeah. I can.
And then you go to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can understand, because a lot of people are doing those open floor plans, so they're changing the interior.
So we'll produce this language and
Yeah.
put it on the agenda again for next month before we go any further with it.
I just have one question on the red line here, exposed foundation, just to give me an example of that on the building height. That's on 1724.
We were speaking in regards to building height, we got into a
So
discussion.
guys, before it's still, we have a motion on the table, right? And
isn't this
This is
discussion on
part
that?
of it.
we're in discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. This is still part of it.
So we had a discussion last month in regards to building height and the new calculations and how
Yeah.
the formula for establishing building height, which will be the highest vertical elevation of the ground at the foundation, establishes the baseline for then measuring your height. We also then got into a discussion in regards to on the areas that don't face the street, where if you've got a hillside, then you have exposed foundation on the downhill side. I don't think we don't want that to complicate our understanding of building height. So I would rather that, if it's, that not be any reference to that other than the exemption that does not contribute to the building height, which is established by the new criteria we've established.
And is street a good enough term
That's right.
for that versus to cover?
I think so. But the only concern there would be a corner, in which case you actually have two streets. So,
Right.
so I think we're covered.
Okay, all right.
That's all.
So we'll bring this back next month with revised language for the.
So then I'm assuming we want to vote down the motion
Vote
to
down on the
approve?
motion. I'm willing to vote down on the motion, but anyways. We're gonna put it to a vote and then
Put
we'll
it to
vote
vote.
it down and.
All
for
in
further review.
favor, say aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
All abstentions? Motion fails.
All right, the next one is 1739-7 through 1739-15. This is, as you may recall, the litany of residential districts where our decision to modify the amount of allowable floor area on residential properties actually required that we modify in each individual district because they all have different floor area ratios. This increased them typically about 25-28% accordingly. There was a table that was put together to illustrate this that actually I don't think there was any discussion or even questions on it last month. If you're happy with this, I would say recommend this to council for approval.
You voted to approve it last time.
Okay, motion to approve zoning ordinance 17.397 through 15 as displayed this evening.
Second from Dave.
To council.
To council, correct. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention passes.
The next one is 1738-18L. This is in regards to maximum building height and the extensive amount of deliberations that we went through a couple months in a row. This was our final version, and some of the final modifications that were made to this based on our discussion last night are in 1739-18L, item C. No building may exceed 3 floors above, and then the language is inserted above proposed finished grade. So as to delineate which grade it is we're talking about. In addition, then under C, II, minimum building setback from all collector and arterial streets. Arterial streets was added in conformance with the recommendations of this body. And again, this was also at that time recommended to council. And we encourage you to recommend again.
So the changes they asked for last time, which were part of the motion, have now been incorporated into the text. And I'd like to thank Lynn Holton, because I believe the 2 changes were her recommendations.
Okay, make a motion to approve and send to council.
Second.
Who was the second?
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions passes.
The next one is an ordinance affecting the zoning code 17.15, and this is the description of increased permitted building height. And the modification here was that, well, first of all, understanding, we've always had an allowance for increased building height in our ordinance. We want to maintain that. The real effective change here is the last sentence. An increase in building height above the first floor elevation shall not be permitted in CBD 1. And we were all in agreement with that, and this also was recommended to council last month. So I encourage you to do the same again this month.
So it's any place but.
Right.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve and send to council.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions passes.
Okay, that brings us up to date with those that we took action on last month. We'll now proceed with, this now is something new for your consideration, 1739-2 through 1739-30. This is not unlike the change that modified all of the floor area ratios for the individual residential districts. This takes the action to remove reference to averaging building height, which is something we've eliminated with our new definition of building height. So this just kind of cleans it up so that we don't have stupid language in 15 stupid sections.
I agree with this, and I will find it. So I'm just in to prove I read this. So section 17393, which is the second line in this, it should be K instead of M.
Oh.
Because M refers to something other than building height. K refers to building height.
Thank you.
It compelled me to check all the rest of them, and they're all good. So I'll make a motion to approve the update to 1739-2 through 1739-30 and recommend to council.
Second.
Who's got the second? Who won?
With the change to make 1739-3 M read 1739-3 K.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I want you to correct
Yes, I do.
your
K,
motion.
not M.
Did I do that correctly?
No, I didn't give you the ample direction.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We have not conducted a public hearing on this one yet, so we want to schedule a public hearing for next month.
Oh,
And
come on.
Then you can recommend it to council.
Details.
Okay, so you're withdrawing your motion?
I have to,
That's
so I
very
will.
well worded motion.
A waste.
Yeah, just
A perfect motion.
Practice.
Sorry, Tim.
someone else take it next month.
Okay, so is there a motion to schedule a public hearing?
Motion to schedule a public hearing for 17.392 through 30.
I'll second.
And a second from Mr. Iker. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay, we're on to 8A, Clerk. Number 1, Planning Commission meeting dates and deadlines. Letter I, discussion and action to approve a date change for the Planning Commission meeting typically scheduled on November 27th. Obviously, that's a bad day, 2019. And the notes here say recommend to do it the Wednesday before, which is the 20th. If you can check your schedules now, that'd be great. I'd actually propose that we do it on the 19th, Tuesday, if that's possible, because I'm going in for a little day surgery on the 20th, and I wouldn't be able to be here. So if
Technology would allow that.
If you pick the 20th, then Mr. Eichel will be running the meeting.
And I think
It's not a bad thing.
No.
So you're saying the 19th? I didn't hear that. 19?
November
I
19th.
would prefer the 19th if that would work.
It's fine with me.
It works.
Yeah. That works.
19th is fine.
Is it what?
It's not held here.
I'll be here.
We can prepare you, we'll prepare you for your day surgery.
Yeah.
This
Okay,
meeting
so-
will prepare you for it.
You will?
Yeah.
Are we doing it or not?
Okay, so
You can bring-
we get a
come out
motion
in a
of somebody
gurney
to
for us.
schedule the next,
Make a motion to approve the next meeting to be November 19th at 7 PM in the Common Council chambers.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay, number 2, meeting okay, that's to be determined, we did that. Number 3, meetings, submittal deadline November 5th, 2019.
That'll actually be November 4th.
November 4th.
Public hearings.
Deadline November 4th, 2019. Public hearing submittal date October 20th.
And there have not been any submittals yet.
Okay. Number 4, the December 2019 Planning Commission meeting date was approved to be held December 18th, 2019 at the January 29th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. So what's the question here? We're just confirming it's on the 18th? Okay, got it. And then we have 2 correspondence. Planners report.
Again, this is a reiteration of last month. We'd like some formal action by the Plan Commission to authorize staff to publish and conduct a public hearing for changes to the comprehensive plan and rezoning for the 5-acre A1 parcel south of 94 on Highway C. That was approved and recommended by this body last month. We just want to reiterate and do with the proper wording on the agenda. Discussion and action.
So I had a different conversation going on in my ear, but you're just asking us to schedule a public hearing.
Yeah,
Which you said we already did.
we did, but because we did not have
The
It wasn't
discussion and
possible
action.
action.
Yes. We were just asked to redo it so that,
Well, I would like to schedule a public hearing for this action, please. Let's do it at our next meeting,
on November 19th.
November 19th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ed seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? I believe that's it. Building inspector's report, he's not here, so number 9. Oh, did you have something? Oh, thumbs up, okay, great.
So red.
Number 9, we are adjourned. Go Nationals.
Yep.